So now I will take over to tell a bit more about specific housing systems, about designing and choosing the housing system and what are important features for the different system. And so I showed this picture before. It's about the three different categories of systems. So the floor housing, the single tier, and the multi-tier system. In most cage-free countries, the multi-tier system is currently the main system that's being built. But of course, that also depends on your local flock size, your local farm size, the height of the buildings, like Peter explained. You're going to build a new building or use existing buildings. And then each of these systems can be combined with free range and can be an organic system. But typically, like Peter also explained, in many countries, the basic system for more intensive production is the aviary system, the indoor system. But as you also saw this morning, that also depends on the local market. See if I can get my English there again. Yeah, so about the pullet rearing, we heard a lot about it already, also in the best practices, and I mentioned this in the introduction also. But for pullet rearing, it's really important to think about the similarity between the pullet system and the later housing system, because to be successful in a complex aviary system, in a multi-tier system as adult hens, pullets really need to learn to use this three-dimensional space during rearing. And also think about supplying pullets with sufficient resource space. And remember that pullets already reach 70 to 80% of their body weight at around 8 weeks of age. And at the end of rearing, the body width is 13 to 14 centimeters. So they need this space. Also, transfer to the layer house and timing of transfer is important, where we recommend to transfer hens or pullets already well before they start egg laying, so around 17 weeks of age. And in some countries it's even done earlier. So let's look at the different systems quickly for pullets and for laying hens. So I start with the floor system that you see here a picture of. This system is used to rear hens for single-tier systems or for floor-based systems, but of course in the adult hens you have the laying nest, so usually these are single-tier systems. In a system like this, it's of course very important to think about the climate when the birds arrive. Also the temperature of the floor should be at the right level to avoid that the chicks are getting cold. I mentioned already, and also in the best practices you heard about litter access. The birds are very motivated to show ground pecking, foraging, dust bathing. They like to be busy with litter. So think about litter supply and give them something to do, and that will help you avoid behavioral problems such as feather pecking and cannibalism. Also perches, in this system of course it's quite one-dimensional. So addition of perches can also give the birds a different behavioral development and also allow them to go resting when they are motivated to do so, and maybe also to avoid birds that are chasing them, for instance. If we then look at the single-tier system, so that's a slightly more complex system where you have a central tier. And sometimes it's also equipped with winchable platforms so that you can add more complexity as the birds get older. Also in a system like this, litter access is important. Usually outside the tier, of course, are the litter areas, the floor areas where the birds can also go to. But in some cases, birds are also confined to the tier during the first weeks of life. And we have seen in studies that pullet rearers that give them again access to litter at all ages tend to be more successful in controlling problems like feather pecking. Then we have the multi-tier system, as I mentioned already in the introduction, quite a complex system. Usually the birds start they are confined to one of the tiers in the aviary system, and then they are set free at an age between 3 and 5 weeks usually. Also there we have seen that litter access is very important. Usually chick paper is provided in the rearing cages, and there also litter will accumulate, feces and feet and feathers and dust, and that gives them something to peck at and to scratch. And we've seen quite some variation in farmers that either take out this paper and keep them on the cage floor for a few weeks, or leave in the paper and the litter. And the more positive results were found when the birds have continuous access to something for pecking and scratching. And also when they are released, then make sure that there's something on the floor also for foraging, like Xavi also addressed. And you see some of the ramps there in the hallway to facilitate pullets going up and down in the system. And that helps the birds to develop their sense of this two-dimensional system, and also develop their wing muscles. They become stronger and more able to navigate the system. Well, this one I also mentioned in the introduction, but I'm going to repeat it because it's so important, that is match between rearing and laying farm. I already mentioned this match in housing systems. That's very important, especially for birds in the multi-tier system, but also the communication between the pullet rearing and the laying farm. So really open communication is important, and discuss what is the situation at the laying farm and how can you match that in the rearing farm as close as possible. And also for laying farmers, we always advise to visit the rearing farm at least once, but preferably more than once, so that you really know the type of flock you're getting, and you can also exchange information on to get as good as a transition as possible from the rearing farm to the laying farm, because that really enhances the chance of a successful laying period, as Peter also stressed. And so again, these different systems that are possible. Of course, your choice also depends on the organization of the local sector, the local market, the local law and regulations, the investment options, the environmental situation, and the size of the flock. So I can see that in every country the situation will be slightly different, whether it's a good idea to move to multi-tier systems indoor, or to free-range systems, small-size farms, large-size farms. Basically, there is a system, I think, for every type of production and for every size of production. And there's a lot of examples out there, as Peter also mentioned, that people are generally very willing to exchange information on how they are performing, how they are doing things. If we then look at the laying hen system, so we go back to the single tier system. Also in the laying hen phase, this good litter quality, dry and friable litter to stimulate foraging, dust bathing. Also in a system like this, you have of course the single tier, but it can also be considered to supply perches, that you have some more possibilities for resting and for avoiding other birds. And also there, you can consider the supply of foraging or packing enrichments in the litter area, that Xavi also mentioned. If we then look at the multi-tier system, also there litter quality is very important, and the foraging enrichment as well. But there it's also important to think about this complex 3D system. Even when the birds have had a very good rearing period, it's very important in the beginning to help hens to find their way in the system. And also here, things like ramps and platforms for easy movement can really help the birds to navigate the system. Something on the mobile housing that's quite common in some countries, usually more for niche markets. So those are small housing units with a free range around them. Of course, with the recent outbreaks of avian influenza, it has been very difficult for this type of production. We have seen that some farmers have added covered verandas to their houses so that they can still give the birds some more space without the risk of avian influenza. Of course, in such a system, you also need to think about the free range itself. How does it look? Does it provide shelter, natural shelter? So also the structure of the free range is very important. And the measures to reduce the risk of predation, so good fencing and good shelter to avoid that a lot of birds are eaten by predators. And this is an example of a large house with a covered veranda next to it as a sort of a transition from the house to the free range. Usually it's very much appreciated by the birds. It's used a lot for foraging, for dust bathing, to be active. And it's been shown to reduce the risk of injurious pecking. And also, as I mentioned, during avian influenza outbreaks, it can be a safe place for the birds to show foraging. And there's usually bird-proof netting around the covered veranda. And it's showing very nice results that you can avoid injurious pecking in a flock because you give them this extra opportunity. And they get fresh air and extra foraging opportunities. And of course, for the free range itself, also the free range offers extra opportunities for foraging through the vegetation, but also through insects that the birds can find. It's been shown that it helps to reduce the risk of injurious pecking, especially when the birds are given access to the free range early in life. And as I mentioned, their natural or artificial shelter or a combination is important, that the birds can run away from threats and also have some place for resting. So a well-structured free range is important there. So that's for the free range and the organic systems. So that was my quick overview of the different systems. Thank you very much. And then I'll hand over to Inma for the next presentation.